Would the Toronto Maple Leafs and Chicago Blackhawks make good trading partners? Could the Hawks help the Leafs with their Peter Mrazek issue? We'll discuss the possible trade scenario and an athletic article. Plus, we're going to look at the latest on the David Pastrnak rumors. We have a ton of signings to discuss and some more recaps from last night's NHL playoff game. We'll discuss that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to look at here today. First up, we did find out last night on another NHL award winner, PK Subban, currently of the New Jersey Devils. He is a pending unrestricted free agent, though. Hard to say where he ends up next year or beyond. Is the winner of the King Clancy Memorial Trophy. The King Clancy Award is essentially for leadership on and off the ice and making a significant contribution to your community. So quite often, the winners of this award usually end up doing a significant amount of work for charity in the local markets where they play or where their hometowns are or what have you. So we know PK Subban. You can say what you want about him, about his on-ice play. Off the ice, he has done a lot of work for charity, humanitarian work, and he's certainly been able to help donate a lot of money. So that's certainly well-deserved. So good on him for that. We obviously had a big pivotal game in last night's Eastern Conference Final last night with the Tampa Bay Lightning tying things up 2-2 after a 4-1 victory on home ice over the New York Rangers. So of course the Rangers won the first two. It was looking like the ice was tilted towards New York, but the Lightning have come back on their two games here at home ice and certainly evened this up and made it a best 2 out of 3 to finish things out. And the way things have looked right now, to be honest, I think the Lightning almost have the momentum and have the edge. We'll see. I mean, the Rangers have been super strong on home ice at MSG recently, so they have to bounce back with a really big Game 5. But if you look at the Lightning, they were in a similar predicament with the Maple Leafs, of course, not quite the same where they weren't down by 2 games, but in that first round, they had a really bad Game 1. Bounced back in Game 2, then they didn't have a good Game 3, bounced back in Game 4, but then they get down again, 3-2 against the Leafs, and then won the final 2. It just took them a while to get going and find their stride, and you could tell the first game or two of this series, I think after a bit of a long layoff, they weren't quite engaged enough. There was some rust there. They weren't executing the way we know they can, but now in the last 2 games on home ice, they look like a completely different team and found a way to get some goals and get the victories here. And now on top of that, the Lightning have a bit of an edge when it comes to team health. I mean, yes, they've been without Braden Point, and they're able to do that. They've been without, 8 games or something now that he's missed. He missed the final few games of the Leaf series, the entire Florida series, in this series as well so far. So I guess that's probably looking at about 10 games or whatever it is now for Point. So they've been really good without him, and he's a really, really strong player. But now the Rangers are dealing with their adversity with getting banged up, and it could be a bigger deal here. Like, obviously the Lightning are a pretty deep team, but the Rangers now, last night, they did not have Ryan Strome, who got hurt the game before, and of course Philip Hedl left the game as well, so they were down 2 centers early, and that really hurt. That was not good at all. They had players playing in spots they weren't used to. The kid line, which had been a driving factor for offense and had so much energy, was no more. At least 2/3 of them were still on the ice, but they weren't a threesome the way they had been. And the Rangers have been good on the power play, but outside of that, the last couple games 5-on-5, it's been extremely tough. The Lightning have been doing a really good job in neutral zone and defensively. And they might be able to swing this the other way now. It's really hard to say. It's not impossible. But, the Lightning, they know how to get things done. And they're not the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions for no reason. So we'll see where this goes. But certainly going to be a very interesting series now. We know it's going to go to at least 6 games. So they will play tomorrow night, Thursday evening. And they will play again Saturday night. That much we do know. If it goes to a Game 7 as well, they are getting an extra day off. There will be no hockey on Sunday night or Monday night. So after the Saturday night game, there will be a 2-night break if Game 7 is required. And then they'll play that the following day on the Tuesday night to wrap things up. And then, of course, if that happens, then the Stanley Cup Final will start on June the 18th, which I know from Colorado's perspective, they're probably happy to have this series go 7. They're getting a long layoff no matter what. To be honest, whether or not you've been off for 9 days or 12, 13, I don't really think it makes a great deal of difference. they're going to have to deal with the potential rest, but at the same time, they're getting the rest. I know they're hopeful to get Kadri back with a long enough layoff. I don't know if it's possible. And even if he's not available for game 1, he could be maybe available by the time we get to games 4, 5, 6 or something like that, depending on how long it goes, right? So we'll see, but certainly teams are banged up. The Rangers do have some things to deal with here, some adversity, and we'll see if they can get back on track on home ice at MSG tomorrow night and try to retake the series lead and see if they can close out the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is not going to be an easy task. Nobody's been able to do it now for close to 3 years. Now, as I mentioned, we have a slew of signings to talk about here. A couple of these guys are active players, and a few of them are prospects. We get the Dallas Stars with a couple signings, re-signing forward Denis Gurianov to a 1-year deal at $2.9 million. Gurianov was going to be an RFA this offseason and will be an RFA next season instead. Essentially, this is his qualifying offer based on his previous contract. That's what the qualifying offer was due to be, was $2.9 million. This is what equivalent to what he had earned this past year. So it's basically the same thing. I mean, Denis Gurianov has been really inconsistent. I know a couple of years back when the Stars made their run to the final and the bubble playoffs, he was a big part of that, and he was really looking like he was starting to break out and become a more consistent star for them. But then the last couple of years, really ever since, he's been terribly inconsistent. Like, he's one of those players, I think, that kind of drives their coaches and management a little bit crazy. You know he's highly skilled. You know he's got talent. There are nights when he looks amazing, and there are nights when he's invisible. And it makes sense why they wouldn't want to go long-term, and they basically want to give him another year to prove himself here and see if he's a big part of this new young core that they're trying to move forward with or not. They still have some vets around, clearly, like Pavelski and Sagan and Ben, but it's basically starting to shift here a little bit, where you've seen the new young core, Jake Ottinger, Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz. Is Gurianov a part of that, or is he going to be somebody who's moved out here in the next year or two if he can't seem to up that consistency? But he's been a 30-point player the last 2 years. He's not, completely invisible out there, but based on his skills, you would think he should easily be able to be a 50 to 60-point player at times for sure. Now, the Dallas Stars also signed defenseman Alex Petrovic. It's a two-way deal. He's basically been signed as somebody who can play with their American Hockey League team. He played down there this year, was a good veteran for them, and they're quite pleased with him. So he gets a two-way deal. He does have NHL experience, so if they run into enough injuries, they can consider him for a call-up if necessary. If he gets called up, it'd be league minimum $750 at the NHL level, but he is getting paid a handsome AHL salary of $350,000. I know last year I think he earned $250 or $275 or something like that, so certainly a bit of a raise over that. To make that kind of money at the American Hockey League is pretty darn good, unless you're assigned to a more one-way contract and you get demoted, you're going to get your salary regardless. But for guys like this that are, fringe players, that's a pretty handsome American Hockey League salary. Now, we also saw a signing in Boston as well. They've signed a German defenseman, right-shot defenseman Kai Wisman, who's a 6'4", 207-pound, 25-year-old undrafted D coming from the DEL, he's been playing there basically since he's been 18, 19 years old. So we'll see. Obviously not a player that I'm overly familiar with, where he's never been drafted, but he's going to make the jump from Germany to the NHL. Clearly got some attention. I did briefly look at his stats. Doesn't look like he's overly offensive, but he certainly has good size. If he can give you some good physicality, then he could be a player that they end up using at the NHL level. It's debatable if he'll play in the NHL or go to the AHL, but it'd be interesting to see how he makes out and transitions to the North American game. The Vancouver Canucks also announced a signing as well. They've taken one of the prospects that we talked about at the end of May, that their rights were going to expire if they weren't signed by June 1st. One of those were held by Colorado, and they did not sign him, so he's available now, and the Canucks are signing Nils Åman, who was a 2026 rounder of the Avalanche. He said he's a center iceman from Sweden, 6'2", 180 pounds. He's played in the SHL the past few years, and like I said, his rights just recently expired here on June 1 with Colorado, so he is now a prospect for the Vancouver Canucks. We also got word on other players as well heading to Europe, including Coyote goalie Joseph Corner. He's no longer going to be playing in the NHL. He is signing to go back and play in the Czech Republic. Tampa Bay Lightning prospect Otto Sampi is heading back to play in Finland after playing 4 seasons in the American Hockey League in the Lightning system. I guess he's probably seen the fact that he's not getting a regular NHL opportunity really of any kind. And it's, best maybe to head back and play pro hockey over there. Of course, he's played in North America for some time. I remember watching him a little bit. He did play his junior hockey in the Quebec League here for the Halifax Moosehead. So obviously, a decent hockey player, just has not worked out in a deep Lightning organization with lots of prospects that have flourished and graduated to the NHL. But unfortunately for him, he wasn't part of that puzzle, and he'll head back and play over in Finland. I'm not sure if he'll ever make an attempt to get back to the NHL or not. We'll see where things go. Major injury update as well. Kraken goaltender Chris Driedger is going to miss the bulk of next season. Of course, he was playing with Team Canada at the World Championships in Finland here recently in May, in the gold medal game against Finland in the third period at that. The Team Canada goaltender Driedger left the game, pulled himself out after suffering an injury. It wasn't real obvious what it was. You could tell it was probably a lower body injury of some sort. But he got off the ice on his own, and it wasn't really clear. But now we've got word from the Kraken organization what exactly happened. When he took himself out of that game, he had a torn ACL. So that's obviously a big deal. Obviously required surgery and a 7 to 9 month recovery. If it ends up being 9 months, that's going to put him pretty much near the end of next year. At this rate, he'd be lucky if he can come back for the final probably month of the season and get a few games in. We'll see where things go. Clearly, they have Driedger and Grubauer under contract. He'll definitely be placed on long-term injury reserve for at least the bulk of the year, maybe not the whole year, but at least in his case too. I mean, as much as he's going to, obviously have a major injury to recover from, at least he has a contract beyond this year. He's on a 3-year deal with Seattle, so there's 2 years left. So at least financially, and he doesn't have to worry about becoming a UFA and not playing all year. That could be a little daunting and stressful, I'm sure. One quick update from the NHL coaching carousel. As I mentioned, we have lots of vacancies. We have a number of coaches that have been let go. We don't really have anybody who's been hired. The only thing we've seen in the coaching world was the Montreal Canadiens confirming that Marty St. Louis was going from interim coach to full-time permanent head coach, and that's it. But according to Elliot Friedman, the Dallas Stars are really very interested in Peter Deboer, now calling him a very much a legit candidate for that coaching position with the Dallas Stars organization. So we will see. They have been linked to a number of other coaches as well. We had heard the possibility of them being in one of the teams interested in Barry Trotz. We had even heard about the possibility of former NHL player and current OHL coach Marc Savard possibly being in the mix, and there's a few others too. So there's certainly all kinds of great NHL coaching talent that's available, whether it be existing experienced coaches, there's some up-and-coming coaches, there's a big variety of names out there in a mix that we haven't seen in a long time, and it's kind of interesting to see which direction a lot of these teams will go. But Pete Deboer certainly has options available should he be looking to get back into the coaching game here immediately. And during the kind of aftermath here of the Edmonton Oilers being eliminated from the playoffs in the Western Conference Final, of course, they had between yesterday and today media availability. We heard a lot from the players in the past 24 hours, and then today we heard from Jay Woodcroft and Kenny Holland. And one thing I took note of was that even though Mike Smith, the goaltender, is under contract for another season at $2.2 million, based on his comments, he sounded very much non-committal on playing next year. Now, I don't think it's reasonable to say yet that he's going to retire or anything like that. He didn't say that it would be, that he's dealing with a major injury or anything and he can't come back. It was nothing of that nature. Just kind of talked about the fact that, it's such a long grinding season, and obviously he's not young. He's, into his early 40s now. And, maybe he decides to hang him up. We don't know. But we know the Oilers are going to be moving on from Mikko Koskinen. He's already announced, or at least the team he signed with, he's going to the Swiss League to play. He's already got an agreement there for a new contract. And Mike Smith has one more year. So there's a lot of debate on, is it going to be Smith and Skinner? Are they going to go shopping for another goalie? They don't have a lot of cap space. What can they do here? It's not going to be easy. But certainly Mike Smith just sounded non-committal. So I do kind of have to wonder if he will play next year, but I do think as well, once he's had a couple of weeks or some time away to kind of decompress and let everything settle and sink in, he's very much a battler and a competitor. I'd probably be a little bit surprised if he left money on the table on that contract and retire. Because if you retire, then you're done. You don't get paid. I mean, if you're injured and you can't play, that's different. You can go on long-term injury reserve. But, at the same time, it doesn't appear that that's really the case. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see in the goalie situation in Edmonton this coming season. And of course, I want to talk a little bit more about David Pastrnak. Now, yesterday was the main topic of the video. Was could he be traded by the Bruins? An article in The Athletic by Fluto Shinzawa just set social media a little bit on fire with this topic, and everybody kind of jumped on it, talking about Pastrnak trade. As I mentioned in the video yesterday, I think we need to pump the brakes on a little bit. Could he be traded? Sure, and I do see the rationale as to why that could happen, but I think it's early to say that. We do know that the Bruins are, for the first time in a long time, in a very different predicament here. They've got some big-time injuries to some really key players that are like Marchand and McAvoy that are not going to be starting next season. They're probably going to miss the first 2 or 3 months of the year, so that's a big gap of time. We don't know about Patrice Bergeron. He's also recovering from an elbow surgery and has indicated he's not in any rush to make a decision. So let's just assume for a second that Bergeron doesn't come back. That's 3 major players not in your lineup. In the last couple of years, you've already lost Krejci, you've lost Torrey Krug. It's not the same team anymore, right? It's hard to say where this goes. In case of Pastrnak, he's got 1 year left on his contract, and the word was that because of all the injuries and the firing of head coach Bruce Cassidy, the change in direction, it was basically didn't say that they're going to trade him. It just said that basically that if he may not want to sign and if that contract negotiations don't go well, that they may not have a choice but to trade him. Because given the new direction of the team and the fact that all these key players aren't going to be there, if he, basically says he's not signing for what they're willing to offer and things go poorly on the negotiation of an extension, then they might feel obligated that they have to. They've lost a lot of players walking for nothing here in the last couple of years. We saw Zdeno Chara, after a long time being captain, leave as a free agent, no return. We've seen David Krejci. I know he went to his home country of the Czech Republic, but there are some that think that a lot of it was because he wasn't getting a good offer to stay. I don't know if that's true or not. But still, either way, he leaves with no return. Patrice Bergeron could leave with no return if he doesn't come back. Torrey Krug left with no return as a free agent. And I know right now that there's a lot of people feel that, Bruce Cassidy was the scapegoat here and all this, and that essentially should be a new regime at the top, including Don Sweeney being replaced, not the coach. But we'll see what happens. But essentially, I know J.P. Barry, the agent for Pastrnak, did talk to Elliot Friedman today and basically said that he as the agent talked to Sweeney as well as Pastrnak today. They've all agreed to talk in July when they're able to about an extension and see where things go. And then it's just a little premature, which I think is fair to say and everybody would agree with. But really, if you see the direction of this team, I think that might be another rationale for wanting to move on from Cassidy, is I do think they're prepared that they might have to take a step back here. They're not going to have much of a choice given all the circumstances that they're faced with. And essentially, this article basically says he's seen some of his friends leave recently and how they were treated, and referring to guys like Krug and Krejci. It also mentions that he had a source that sent him via text a message that said that basically, to sum it up, was that if Don Sweeney's the GM, that Pastrnak is not signing there because he's seen how he's treated his friends and recently, and expects probably leaving it up to our interpretation, but insinuating that he's not going to get paid anywhere near what he wants, and he's going to up and want to leave. So it makes sense that they try to trade him to get a return. They've had enough players leave with no return. It's not good for the organization, clearly. So we'll see where all this goes. I do think it's going to be a story that is worth following and keeping an eye on, but it's very premature to jump to conclusions here and say he's definitely going to get traded. If he were to be traded, I think they'd get one heck of a haul. A 27-year-old player with 40 goal aspirations that does it without much difficulty. That you're looking at probably multiple first round picks, a top prospect, and a roster player, something to that effect. Probably a good solid 4 assets would be my guess, and there'd be lots of interest. I have no doubt. But like I said, we're not there as of right now, and I don't see it really being anything for sure that happens. He's young enough too that if they want to try to do a quick retool, that he could be a big part of the solution. Like they just traded for Hampus Lindholm at the deadline and signed him to a big extension. It just doesn't really make sense to do that if this is the direction that they're heading in. But things can change quickly sometimes. Now, of course, the other thing I want to talk about today is, are the Leafs and the Hawks great trade partners? Another Athletic article, this one by Mark Lazarus, where he includes a couple of writers that also work for The Athletic. You get Jonas Siegel of the Toronto side and Scott Powers helping out from the Chicago side, because obviously Lazarus covers the Hawks as well, and talks about the fact basically that the Chicago Blackhawks need a goaltender. They don't have anybody at the NHL level under contract for next year, so they're going to have to do something. And why not take advantage of the Maple Leaf situation and bring in Mrazek? Essentially, he's got 2 years left at $3.5 million, so getting him off the books for Toronto after a really poor season is big for them. So you got to look at what is that worth to the Maple Leafs to get that money off the books. We saw when they had to get rid of Marleau, they gave up a first-round pick. They're not going to want to do that, and Marleau's salary obviously was a lot more than Mrazek, but maybe they give up a second-rounder and a prospect, or something a little less than a first-rounder. Like, Dubas is not going to want to move his first-rounder. That much we know for sure. So, obviously, we know these teams talked at the deadline too, and obviously there was a little spat there between Dubas and Davidson, and they said obviously they talked it over after, and everything was made up and all well and good, which is nice because it does make a lot of sense, as this article points out, that they talk again here. Like I said, Mrazek can go to Chicago. It's a 2-year deal that he's under. They don't care about wins right now. I think Chicago's really just kind of cares about turning this roster over and really gathering up as many picks and prospects to try to get as quick into a rebuild here as they can. It's going to be hard to get into a full rebuild as long as you get guys like Taves and Kane on the books, to a degree, Strome to Brinkett. So we'll see what all moves here in the next year out of this organization. But certainly if they take Mrazek, like I said, they're not going to be caring too much about W's, so they can do that. Another name mentioned in the article that could be a throw-in that the Leafs have been very interested in moving as well is Justin Hall. Obviously, the Hawks could take him on for $2 million for one more year as well, and maybe they have to throw in a second-round pick and a prospect. The prospect in the article that was suggested was Nick Abruzzes. Obviously, not a high-level prospect, but a decent one. So, to me, that's a pretty good deal. If you could dump the Mrazek and Hall contracts on Chicago for a prospect of that level and like a second-round pick, that's worth it. Now, the return to Toronto would probably be next to nothing. It might even be nothing. It could be future considerations. It could be a 7th-rounder, or maybe it's nothing. I don't know. But either way, that creates, over $5.5 million of salary cap space availability that Kyle Dubas desperately needs. That might be enough to maybe re-sign Jack Campbell. We don't know if the hesitation, you could say, to offer more money to Campbell was the fact that they just couldn't afford it through their salary cap, or is it that they don't feel he's worth it? I guess time will tell, and we'll see on that front. But either way, whether it be Campbell or somebody else, they're going to need that kind of money available to get a quality goaltender in place. Not to mention that they wouldn't mind doing some other things here on the roster, because there's lots of other contracts that are expiring and other decisions that are going to have to be made, but goaltending is a big one. So to me, this makes all too much sense. So will the Kyles get together and pull off a trade between the Blackhawks and the Leafs? Will we see another original 6 trade sending some players that Toronto basically doesn't want to Chicago as they go through their rebuild? Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.